Welcome to r/revenge stories, where you will hear satisfying revenge stories from 4 different subreddits. If you are new around here, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I upload daily content, and without wasting any more time, let's dive right in. And the first one is titled, "Don't fire people for being injured at work." A friend of mine was electrocuted at work. It was pretty bad. Later on, he was fired because he was electrocuted. Fortunately, he turned that around when he learned he could get disability for the electrocution, but it knocked out several teeth that are not coming back. Anyway, I called OSHA and told them about the electrocution. They were not so interested in that, but perked right up when I told them that the place routinely locked the emergency fire exit doors to prevent employees from stepping outside to sneak a smoke. Well, they inspected, found the locked emergency exit doors and went to town on them. Turns out, a long time ago, a business on the East Coast locked the security doors and there was a fire, killing several dozen people. OSHA gets very sensitive about stuff like that. The owner was fined $40,000 for the security doors. He also spent quite a bit of money fighting it for 10 years, but eventually had to pay anyway. And guys, I would say that definitely serves him right. And I'm curious, have you ever gotten injured at your workplace? Let us know in the comments. I got back at my homophobic father by pretending to have a boyfriend and bringing him over for Christmas dinner, causing him to freak out and lose himself in front of the whole family. By the way guys, sorry, I had to censor that word because, you know, YouTube. Anyway, ever since I can remember, I have been completely and utterly under the thumb of my father. All of us have been, us being me, my younger brother, little sister and my mother. My father is a raging a-hole. A male chauvinist, over-the-top macho type of guy. And I've always been the victim, growing up, of his dislike. Because I did not really fit in with his image of the ideal son. I was, for lack of a better word, a bit of a girly boy growing up. I wanted nothing more than to dance and frolic around in dresses. When I was 4 or 5, my mother had this big box of dress-up clothes. She brought it down from the attic and I immediately picked out the prettiest, frilliest, golden-colored dress I could find. I pranced around in it and declared myself a princess. And that I was now a girl. This went on for a few months, but strictly during the day when my father was away at work. I watched ballet videos with my mother, a soft-spoken and open-minded woman who worked part-time as a social worker in those days. I was happy, careless. My father was and is an authoritarian figure, had himself legally emancipated at an early age just so he could join the army ahead of time. After 3 years in the army, he left as a lower-level officer and started a career as a seaman. He was a captain when he and my mother met and had me. Later, he left his naval career and became a traveling salesman. Think Don Draper if Don Draper was a 6'4" Western European man with curly graying hair and piercing blue eyes. I've always found him incredibly intimidating and I think my mother did too. Anyway, long story short, he came home early one day, he saw me in my dress and told me in an icy cold voice, "Go and take it off. After you take it off, go sit on the sofa." So I took it off, little hands trembling. Next he summoned my mother into the room, demanded to know, "What the hell have you been doing to my boy?" I've never seen a person shrink so much so quickly. I myself was like a little tiny fly on the wall at this point, barely present. He took the box with clothes up to the attic, put a lock on it and informed us that we were not to touch it until my wife gives me a daughter. It stayed there on the attic, untouched until my sister was born 10 years later. My father took more of an interest in my upbringing after this point. He took me to see Navy ships, races, made me go on a martial art. He seemed determined to make a man out of you. And in some ways he succeeded. One thing he allowed me to do was keep my hair long, knowing I was bullied at school for it and wanted at times to cut it off for that reason. He insisted I kept the long hair, faced the bullies and beat the crap out of them every time they called me a girl to show them how much of a girl I was. I did just that. It toughened me up in some ways, but it also damaged me in other ways. By the time I went to college, I had grown into a pretty normal dude. I was not gay, I was not even a cross-dresser, although deep down inside I still had those urges. I tried desperately to fit in and be what they wanted me to be, but I also grew more and more resentful. In college, I made a lot of different friends, including some guys I met in an acting class we both took. One of them was pretty much your typical flaming and fabulous type of guy. He was over the top gay as my father was over the top straight. I told him one night when we were drinking about my upbringing and my terrible father. And my friend, let's call him Paul, suggested I should get back at him. I asked him how. Basically, why not pretend like I was gay? But not just that, say it over the phone or something, or even to my father's face in person. No, much better, I would hint for weeks in advance about having met somebody and being in a relationship. I would say it was a girl. I would ask if I could bring Paula over for dinner at Christmas, when the whole family would be there, and I would arrive at the house with Paul instead. So I did exactly that. I went to the house at Christmas. Dressed to the nines, I told my father and mother that Paula was caught up. She's about to come. I will just open the door. So I sat down with my family, cousins, uncles, aunts, my grandparents, just as conservative as my father. So I waited a while, heard the door and rushed to open it. I walked into the living room where everyone was gathered and introduced Paul, my boyfriend. I've never seen a room go so quiet. People literally gasped for air. My sister, brother and mother looked both scared and amused, but everyone else was in shock. My father seething, he just completely lost it. Right in front of everyone, veins bulging in his neck to the point where they looked like they were about to pop. He told me to leave. Ordered me, essentially. My grandparents urged him not to make a scene, but he made one. I just replied calmly how he should do it. Call the police and explain the situation to them. I knew he never would. He knew some of the officers well. It was not a call he would be willing to make, and it was not a situation he was willing to explain. I called his bluff and he just sank. Like basically, he shrank before my eyes. My mother and grandmother had to calm him down. He walked out of the room defeated. I just stood there not believing my own eyes. I finally felt free. Like I did not give a F anymore. He had scared me for so many years, terrified me, and now I could see him for the caricature he really was. It felt amazing. Paul and I stayed the whole evening. He played his part perfectly. He eventually managed to charm some of my aunts and even my grandmother, who told me unironically how she was glad I found such a delightful man, and that he reminded her of her favorite TV character, Mr. Humphreys from Are You Being Served Such a Doll? My father later came back to the room. Sat in a corner, sulking, refusing to meet my gaze. He drank too much whiskey. My mother kept talking to him in a hushed tone of voice, and he kept making a go-away gesture with his hand. I stayed away from home for a while. I've already explained to everyone how it had been a prank, how I had to make a point and get back at my father for how he had treated me. Pretty much everyone sympathized. I did not lose anyone in my family over what happened. However, my father lost a lot of respect in people's eyes, I feel. He was always in control of things, he always directed the scene, but now he does not anymore. I do my own thing, my sister does her own thing, he cannot order people around anymore. And I feel like a fool for ever letting him. I can now wear whatever the hell I want to wear, enjoy whatever hobbies I want to enjoy, and nothing changes. He threatened to disinherit me that night. He threatened a lot of things, but in the end, something inside him just broke. All of my relationships since have been with women, and I have since married and had children of my own. My younger brother came out as gay eventually, but by that time my now aging father had mellowed down somewhat, and as he already has grandchildren and his legacy is thus secured, he did not seem to mind much. It helps that my brother is a muscular gym rat and that they can bond over sports more than my father and I ever did. But whenever the subject of sexuality comes up, my father is still incredibly awkward. I don't think it will ever change, but I feel my revenge has been pretty successful in the end. And guys, if you have watched until here, please feel free to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Furthermore, please let me know if you like revenge stories. The next one is titled "Wanna Cut in Line? Get Tboned" and was posted on r/nuclear-revenge. By the way guys, the format I'm following with this series is that we start out with pro revenge, go to nuclear revenge, then go to petty revenge, and then read maybe a revenge story from our own subreddit. Anyway, this happened a few years ago, so it's probably safe to post about now. I was attending college at the time, and since I only lived 30 minutes away, I drove there. Preamble, I am in North America and we drive on the right side. The college campus itself was located in a fairly busy area with a lot of pedestrian traffic, and there were only 2 roadway entrances to the campus. The main entrance road was located north of a very busy 4-lane road. We will refer to this as VB Road. This section of VB Road is particularly bad. The nearby expressway exit dumps right at the start of this logjam, and there are 6 stoplights within a quarter-mile stretch afterwards, which adds to the gridlock. My 30-minute commute was literally a 15 minutes from my house to the VB Road exit and 10 to 15 minutes to drive this section before I reached the college entrance. It sucked, but it is what you get for living in a big city. As mentioned earlier, this is a 4-lane road, 2 lanes east, 2 lanes west, but just before the college entrance road there is a generously long right turn lane. I typically take the expressway, exit right onto VB Road and keep in the right lane so I can pull into the right turn lane to get to school. The pedestrian traffic in this area is heavy, so only about 4 cars make it through the right turn for every stoplight cycle. After several weeks of commuting, I noticed that there is a guy in a green Miata, we will refer to him as Shithead, who keeps last minute merging into the right turn lane in a pitiful attempt to line hop the very slow right turn lane. There were many times where people left space and he could have easily and safely merged, but this a-hole constantly holds his lane up to look for an opportunity to pop into the right turn lane at the very last moment. This of course annoys me, along with many other people who actually understand the area and make this same commute every day. Background: I drive a old, pretty ratty looking SUV. You would probably say it looks like a piece of crap, but mind you, it is my piece of crap. I actually take pretty good care of it. Fluids are changed regularly, well maintained, faulty components, or at least one suspected of being faulty, replaced before they become a problem. Body rust is the only ugly thing. Just weeks prior to school, I had installed a big brake kit, essentially a huge brake update to what was previously stock. This old POS, aka my POS, will now stop just as fast, if not faster, than most cars. One day, everyone is waiting in traffic as usual and Shithead shows up almost as expected in the right lane on VB Road just prior to the college. Not in the right turn lane, mind you. As Shithead and I creep along VB Road, he eventually makes it very close to me. With the brake upgrades installed previously, I can follow very closely to the car in front of me and block Shithead from merging in front of me into the right turn lane. We are getting pretty close to the right turn into the college road. Shithead is still beside me, now furious that I have repeatedly blocked him off from getting into the right turn lane. At this point, I am the first car to be making the right turn into the college road and Shitbag is beside me. He is still in the right lane, not the right turn lane. I figure he will probably try to make a right turn from his lane, so the instant the stoplight turns green, I gun it. Shitbag, on the other hand, thinks he has the faster car and tries cutting me off to the right turn. What he did not count on was that I did not plan on braking. My POS slams into the passenger side of the Miata and crunches the entire side of his car right in. The front wheel was completely bent inwards. Of course, I put it in park, jump out and proceed to yell the crap out of him. He tries to lie that I cut him off until 4 to 5 others pull into the college parking lot saying they saw the whole thing. College attendees who had previously witnessed Shitbag's antics. We subsequently file a police report and Shitbag is found at fault for improper turn and grill for my POS. They were pretty rough looking beforehand, but not damaged. On the other hand, Shitbag ended up having to take the bus for the entirety of the year. Let me make it clear that this was a fairly low speed collision, around 10 miles per hour at worst. How fast can you get going within 10 feet anyways? There was almost no chance that a potential passenger would be injured. I simply accelerated into the right turn slightly more aggressively than normal while ignoring the fact that Shithead was very likely to try making the same turn, illegally I might add. With that being said, how would this situation played out had it been some little old lady with worse reaction timing? The answer is likely the same. Edit number 2, say it was you, an ordinary driver in a bit of a rush and unaware of Shitbag's antics. Light turns green, you simply look, make sure the crosswalk is clear and accelerate into the right turn. Tell me how your situation would have differed. Technically speaking, he drove in front of me, I simply ignored my hunch and that he would do that. Edit number 3, thanks for the gold guys. Before anyone rages at me too hard, I got nothing against Miatas or any other make/model for that matter. For the curious, my POS is a 2000s model body-on-frame SUV, not willing to divulge much more than that. And guys, I'm curious, do you think OP overreacted in this case? Do you think what he did was justified? Let us know in the comments. And the next one is gonna be from r/petty revenge. It is titled, Friend's mom loses it on me for using her decorative soaps. I get revenge by stinking the place up a bit. As a kid growing up, I had never encountered the concept of decorative soaps and towels. To me, soap was for cleaning up, towels were for drying hands. I had never encountered towels and soap that were not supposed to be used. The idea had never occurred to me. When I was 9, I was over at a friend's place hanging out. After using the washroom at my buddy's house, I proceeded to wash my hands with delicate decorative seashell soap and then dry them with decorative towels. I go back to the rec room to continue playing Monopoly with my friends. About half an hour later, we hear a shriek coming from upstairs. We looked at each other in shock, then my buddy's mom came rushing down the stairs, clutching several small decorative soaps in her hand and screaming, "Who the hell used my soap?" I was in shock, I admit. I did not answer because I was stunned as I tried to process this scene. I mean, she was acting like I pissed in her fridge, but all I had done was wash my hands after a pee. Aren't you supposed to do that? I wondered, is that not what soap is for? Meanwhile, angry mom is yelling at us. "Come on, out with it! Which one of you bastards did this?" Meekly I reply, "I did. Why? Was I wrong?" "These soaps are for decoration only," she yelled. "What kind of ignorant bastard would ruin my decorative soaps?" I started to reply to try and defend myself from what I considered the ludicrous charge of using soap. I tried to explain that I had never seen or heard of soap not meant to be used, but she immediately interrupted. "Well, I don't know what kind of mother you must have to be so ignorant," and went storming back upstairs, audibly muttering about what a bad kid I was and how my mother was a bad mother. I was mortified and embarrassed, as was my buddy. He apologized for his mom's behavior and said that she was nuts about her decorative soaps and towels. He said he should have warned me and was sorry, which was nice of him. As we chatted, he started listing other things his mom was crazy about, like raking her living room carpet. Seriously, it was a deep shack and she had a garden rake she used only indoors on that carpet. If you walked across the carpet, you had to rake it after you because she would lose it if there were footprints in her shack. Turns out, the thing she loved the most was her garden. She was nuts about it and would brag about it constantly to anyone who would listen. After the shock and embarrassment wore off, I was pretty angry. Angry because the idea of soaps and towels you cannot use is stupid. angry because she thought it was okay to yell at me like I had just crapped in her bathtub. I felt revenge was in order. I waited about a week, during which I began to collect dog poo in a bag. We had a dog and it was my job to clean up the poo, so it was not a difficult task as it was a chore I was responsible for anyway. Instead of putting the poo bags in the garbage can, however, I hid them behind our shed. Then, at about 3 AM one night, I snuck over to my buddy's house and filled his mom's garden with dog poo. Our dog was a boxer and pretty big, so a week's worth of poo was a lot of poo. I put poo on the ground, poo in her bushes and poo inside some of the flowers. I even lined dog poo along the windowsill, so when you looked out the window it looked like the crappiest Easter ever. F you, Mrs. Benito. Edit, for those who are asking, here is how things turned out. Unfortunately, the follow-up is a bit of a letdown. I simply don't know how she reacted, my buddy never mentioned it, which is understandable as her hysterics embarrassed him mightily. I never asked, fearing that if I did so it would be tantamount to confessing that I had been the poop distributor. And guys, let me know in the comments which revenge subreddit do you enjoy the most? Pro revenge, nuclear revenge or petty revenge? And the last one was posted on r/ripe stories and is also a revenge story, which is titled Marine Corps Malicious Compliance Terminal Lands Early Years. As the title suggests, I am a prior service Marine. I served for 5 years between 2009 and 2014. I was a 0651 data network specialist, but I had not been taught networking in the Marine Corps. I actually had a background in most things technologically driven years prior while I was in middle and high school. By the time I had decided to join the Marine Corps, I had my A+, back when it was an actual useful certificate, my CCNA, and was working on my CCNP and CCIE. So, as I got to the comp school in the stumps during the hottest month of summer, the instructor told me to kick back since I already knew the lessons, since I had renewed my CCNA the month before I went to boot camp. Fast forward to February 2012, I've been in my first unit for about 2 years and 3 months, we have deployed, and NCO was promoted to sergeant by sucking up to the SAC-NAV, which is Secretary of the Navy, while he was still 2 years below zone. I have trained up all of the guys that I had come to the unit with on how to actually do the job, or so I thought, and we have gotten a brand new boot drop of 4 brand new PFCs into my specific section of the communications platoon. At this point, I know who's going to be doing all of the work, because when I went through the courses in the stumps, the instructors were not really teaching networking, they were telling people what to do and giving them passing grades. If you flunked a test in these classes, you were an absolute idiot, because they gave you the answers to the questions and even allowed you to take it open book if you wanted. That is right, I assumed that I would be the one doing the work. About 2 days after the drop, the Wednesday of that week, our communications chief came into the room and directed our wholly unqualified sergeant to get the COC trailer set up for a field op. Come the first week of March, we are heading out to the field. Now obviously at this point, there is 2 weeks left in the month and getting the trailer set up does not really take that long. However, the sergeant has the worst idea I have ever heard come out of his empty brain spill out of his mouth. This is the beginning of the longest malicious compliance, seemingly so, of my entire Marine Corps career. SS is Staff Sergeant, OP is me, CB is Corporal B, M any of the random boot drop brain dead minions. SS: Senior Lance Corporal OP, take these new Marines downstairs and get them to disconnect all of the equipment and bring it up here. I cringed. I am a POG, personal other than grunt. Getting called Senior Lance Corporal in a combat unit is like getting called Corporal in any other unit, because the majority of 0300 MOS fields would have a Lance Corporal remain a Lance Corporal, sometimes up to 6 years before they would be able to finally pick up Corporal. OP: Yes SS. CB, wanna come with me and help me out with the boots? CB: Nah, just make sure they don't F anything up. Me and the 4 boots walk out of the office and down the stairs, and I start to give directions when one of the minions started trying to give me and the others orders. I do not suffer fools well. OP, help the others disconnect the routers and switches. I give him a look of disbelief. OP, listen, if you want something from me you can ask, but don't assume you can give me orders. I scored the top of my class. What did you score, huh? OP, I did not score in my class. Then shut the F up and do as you are told. OP, I will tell you what, I'm going to head back upstairs and I will just leave all of you to it. That's just what I did. I walked back up the stairs and sat down in the office. CB gave me a puzzled look. I looked back at him, and as if he understood exactly what was running through my head, he said, "Got it." As that day continued, I tried to offer my help, explaining to them exactly how 2 Mardiv wanted our network to communicate with theirs. Without fail, the same boot that had tried issuing me orders earlier said, if you're not going to do this yourself, maybe you should just shut up and let the boots learn. Now, if you have any understanding of networking and the TCP/IP stack, you know that around that point in time, layer 3 switches from Cisco were becoming a big thing. You also knew that layer 3 switches from Cisco were equipped with auto-pin switching technology so that a straight-through Ethernet cable could be run from one switch to another instead of having to make a brand new crossover Ethernet cable. Or is it Ethernet? I'm not sure. Anyway, unfortunately, auto-pin switching was the most unreliable feature at this time, and these Marines did not know that. They got all of the programming loaded up correctly, they got all of the cables hooked back up, mostly in the correct fashion, and they called it a week. That night, myself and CB stayed overnight to make sure everything was actually set up correctly, the cables were in the right place, but we both noticed that 2 of the switches on the NIPR, non-secret network used for general communication, side of the network were not talking. I disconnected the Ethernet cable from both switches and looked at the tips. Sure enough, it was a straight through cable, and I knew right then how screwed that boot was about to be. I left the cable as it was, told CB and said, OP, he wants them to learn on their own. They are all going to get a horrible lesson in the death of the battalion. Not the literal death, obviously. 2 weeks later, we set out upon the most poorly planned field operation I've ever been on. 3 days with no potable water, no food other than MREs, and of course a COC, Command Operations Center, with no accessible internet. I watched these 4 poor boots scramble for 3 days, looking around the trailer, making sure all of the cables were plugged into the right places, making sure all of the devices were powered. Each one of those days, I catch each of those 4, look at that exact cable, each of them unplug it, check the tips, plug it back in, check the programming for the ports on both switches, and move on. On the morning of the 4th day, we tear down the COC and have to move to a location 30 miles away, part of the logistics of the field OP. We make the drive, we set the COC back up, and of course the problem with the internet persists. By this point, the BC, battalion commander, is visibly and audibly upset and comes into the communications tent, screaming and berating the fresh butter bar second lieutenant in command of comm. He assures the BC that the problem will be dealt with in a timely manner, and the ass chewing gets passed down the line until it gets to CB. From there, the ass chewing jumps straight over to me and goes directly to the 4 boots, and of course, the 3 that did not score at the top of the class put the 4th on the chopping block. CB, you're going to fix this right now. The 3 boots together, we cannot figure it out, but he should be able to, pointing at the snobby boot. Stuck-up boot walks right over to me and says, fix it, do your job, I'm going to make sure you get non-wrecked. Non-recommended for promotion, for this. I walk right over to the same cable they had each eyed for 3 days with a pair of crimpers and a new RJ45 tip, cut off the old one, rearranged 2 pairs of wires, put the new tip on, crimped it and plugged it back in. Almost instantly, you could hear all of the officers and senior staff NCOs in the COC tent scream for joy when they instantly had their emails finally pop up. M. What the hell did you do? OP. I fixed it. Didn't they teach you in comm school that when you connect two like devices operating on the same layer, that you should always use a crossover cable? Moral of the story, in the Marine Corps you're going to learn, it depends on you as to how painful the lesson is going to be. For this particular PFC, he was non-racked every month for an entire year by the company first sergeant and never effed with the LCPL that the sergeant give orders to. Especially when there are corporals there that are supposed to be leading. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's content, and if you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join our amazing community. Furthermore, don't forget to go to r/ripe_stories on Reddit to post your own stories if you want me to read them out in a video. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I see you again tomorrow.